Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool. And somebody had posted in the comments a few videos back that they were wondering about what my favorite pliers were. And I have tons of pliers, and when I tried to think of my favorite, it would be kind of like, well, if I could only have one. But then I thought, you know, maybe something that would be a little more interesting would be what pliers I've used recently, or mostly, in, say, the last month. And so I was looking through my pliers and came up with 5 of them. And I also narrowed it to Snap On. You know, I could also do Klein and Knipex, but across the board, these were pliers I used quite a bit more than any other plier. And I wanted to show you some about them, but also, you know, why they kind of caught my interest for whatever the job was when there were choices available. So let's start down here. This is the lineup, the Snap-on lineup of their slip joint pliers. The larger 3 here actually have a triple joint, and then the smallest is just a single, kind of a standard slip joint. But this particular one here, which is the second smallest, is the one that I've grabbed for of the slip joints for the most different jobs over time, you know, across lots of different tasks. And I really like this particular size. This particular one is the 46 ACF. The 47 ACF is sort of the standard larger size, and then you can go all the way up to the 49 ACF, which is a great big one. And this is a wonderful pair of pliers. But going back just to the size of it, you can see, you know, it's quite a bit smaller than kind of traditional slip joints, but it's got a large enough head to do serious work and thick padded handles, so you can really kind of wrench on it. And with this triple joint that Snap-on has, it actually allows you to grab some pretty big things. Of course, you lose the leverage of having long handles, but for a lot of jobs, this is just the right size. And, you know, when you need the kind of space that something this big requires, it can limit the job a little bit, or you move to another tool. But, you know, I still love these things. But anyway, this was a really common plier in my hand over the last month. Next one was this little kind of Talon grip needle nose. This is one of their smaller ones. They do make smaller, and they make, of course, the larger ones. But I found myself grabbing this for a lot of different jobs, especially kind of unusual jobs, you know, grabbing things, bending things. I was working on some door latches that required some special springs, so I was kind of trying to mold those and then fit them into place. But I really like these. And this is another pair of Snap-on older kind of traditional needle nose pliers, traditional size and shape. But if you look at the actual blade configuration, and this is their Talon grip, and you look at that, you can see that what I've got in my hand basically is a tiny version of a larger plier. So this behaves at the tip end quite a bit like a regular full-size needle nose, but quite small. And also, if you notice, the arc of the handle is, in this case, large enough, not too large, but large enough to get some grosser dexterity, some bigger movements, but you can also retain the precision. As I go down to this one, you'll see why a smaller handle can be better. But sometimes the larger handle here, even just a little bit bigger, can reduce some of the tip precision. But anyway, so this one I ended up using quite often. The next one was kind of similar, and that was this particular Snap-on Talon grip with the 2 biting jaws in it. And this one here, this is the 196 ANCF. And I discovered a bit of a mystery. I've had this one for quite a while, and I assumed it was a Snap-on. I think I remember being able to see under magnification Snap-on written there. However, I noticed if you look at this rivet, it actually has kind of a unique shape, you know, sort of this 3 lobes. And I haven't seen that on other Snap-on tools, but then I haven't looked at a lot of old pliers, kind of this kind of plier. But this was my first experience with actually a kind of a biting jaw on a pair of needle nose. And I really like these. I also wondered about the handle profile, and in fact the handle material even. It's a little bit different. This is an older one here. The vinyl's a little different, and then the handle shape's a little different. And I thought, could this be a different brand? If anybody knows, I'd love to know in the comment section. But anyway, this is when I first learned that sometimes, even in a needle nose, it's helpful to have the ability to grab something, say a nut or a bolt, with some jaws, which you can't do with the flat angled surfaces. And I say angled because they aren't parallel till it's closed. So obviously to put something in there, you're grabbing at an angle which often doesn't grab tight enough to keep it on the fastener. It tends to slide out. But anyway, so this was a fairly recent Snap-on purchase within the last year, I think, and this particular one, I find it in my hand quite often, or if I go out and it's sort of a smaller, more precise job, but still, you know, say in an engine bay, I tend to grab something like this because it also gives me the option to grab a nut or a bolt or some other fastener and wrench on it. It's got the cutters, it's got 2 different sizes of the grabbing jaws, and then it's got this kind of Talon or Talon-like grip with some fairly stout, kind of beefy tips on it, and it's full size, nice big needle nose there. Next one is this guy here, and surprisingly, what I've used this most for in the last month has been untying small rope, small cordage that gets knots in it, because this allows me to grab it and then just kind of work the knot loose. I do use it for electronics, and I'm quick to grab it when I was working on some computers, and it's just a great all-around spring-loaded plier. This is Klein's version of sort of a similar one. It's not spring-loaded, but you can look at the tips here. They're a little different. This one here is the Snap-on. You notice they're flat, a little stouter, so they take a rotation a little bit better compared to this Klein. But what I really liked was the way this handle fit in my hand compared to the Klein. The Klein just didn't sit quite right. My hand was, first of all, this is really slippery. Not as slippery as a Snap-on stubby screwdriver, but pretty close. So it's hard to hold on to in kind of a real precise fashion. You don't necessarily need cushion. What you need is kind of that spongy grip so it locks in your hands. And as you can see, you know, even just trying to move this thing is slippery, whereas this thing really hangs on just with its own stickiness. But I wanted something like this with better performance, and ended up with this Snap-on. And then I use this is kind of a bolt cover. You can get them at the hardware store in all kinds of different shapes and sizes and colors, but I tend to slide things like that over the tips of my spring-loaded pliers just to protect them. But anyway, that's one I kept grabbing. Lastly is this guy, which is this is the 7/8/6 CF. This is their flush cut for working with primarily zip ties, and I'm grabbing this all the time. Do a lot of bike work, and I've also been doing some cleanup. And you know, cleanup kind of involves zip ties in a lot of cases when I'm organizing things and stringing wire, doing some management of cables, etc. And I just love this thing. The size of it is great. This was the one I used prior. This is a little tiny Klein one, not too expensive, flush cutter, but this one you have a lot more strength, a little more precision too, real sharp points. If you notice here, it's got an opening, so if you go to cut something like a piece of zip tie, you can't just slide it all the way to the edge like this, because not this one totally misses, but even if I get part of it in there and cut, it didn't take it off, because you can see it just scored it, because you couldn't just slide it down. you know, especially if you can't see or you got both hands way down somewhere in the engine, or, you know, you're just twisted in a funny shape because of where the zip tie ended up. So if I grabbed it here and squeezed, I didn't cut it all the way. Look at that. I'm cutting away, but it's missing it. So this was really nice, because then I could just, you know, reach in there and snip it off. I actually stayed away so I could get a little bit more. Snip it, right? So let me show you. If you use something like this standard vector edge, it will snip it. But you can see it's pretty sharp there. That's probably a more dangerous cut than leaving a tail hanging out. Here's another Snap-on. This is an older one, I think. You can see nice clean cut, except it sticks way out. Here's the Klein. If I line it up right, and you have to be careful because you have just this very limited amount of space to work with. That's pretty good. Probably not going to cut yourself, but this one, so much easier. As I slide this out, I can just stick it anywhere and nip it off. In fact, way down at the blade tips, or the blade edges, is a really good place to grab it. I'll show you that. So I can just slide it down in there, squeeze. You know what I did there. Try that again. Going way down. Like that. This, you can see, nice clean cut. Do that again, up close. If I shove it way down, I obviously get into that gap at the very bottom, but generally not too much of a problem. Right there. If I push it up tight, hard, right there, and nip it off, it almost cuts down underneath, which is kind of amazing. Whoops, did you see that? We can see it's not just flush, but if I stick this in here and push hard and nip it off, it's almost like it's underneath the actual area. But anyway, these are great. I use them a lot, and they're way better than if you're trying to do something with a, you know, one of these standard ones where basically you just turn it into a knife. So those are the 5 pliers that I've actually used the most, and I'll probably do another video with some of the other kinds of pliers, because, you know, it interests me. These are the kind of videos I'd watch, but I'm also curious, you know, about this myself, like looking at a pile of tools, saying, what would I grab if I, you know, just had to grab a couple of tools and, you know, go out to a task, or, you know, what's the thing that's been in my hand the most, or the most often, and I end up kind of learning from it by exploring, you know, like the history. How did I end up with that, and why do I choose that, and, you know, where did that decision come from? But anyway, hope you found this valuable, and with that, Doc out.